So there's this new AI breakthrough, and it might actually change the path to AGI. Let's talk about it. So a startup called Eon Systems literally just plugged a biological brain map into a virtual body. And I mean, my mind is genuinely blown. Now, I know this sounds like science fiction, but this actually happened last week. Essentially, they took the brain of a fruit fly, a literal biological brain, and they sliced it up thinner than a human hair, mapped every single neuron, mapped every single connection between those neurons, and then they loaded all of that raw biological data into a computer, and they attached it to a virtual body. And the thing just started walking. I mean, nobody programmed it to walk. Nobody wrote a line of code telling it how to move its legs. Nobody trained it with massive data sets the way we train normal AI. The brain just woke up in the simulation and it did what brains do. Pretty wild. And I mean, genuinely, I think this could be one of the most important moments in neuroscience right now. And it has massive implications for how we actually build artificial intelligence going forward. But to understand why this is such a massive deal, you have to understand one word, and that word is connectome. A connectome is basically just a complete map of a brain, every neuron, every synapse. Think about it like this. Think about how you use Google Maps on your phone to see all the roads connecting different cities. You can see the big highways, you can see the little side streets, you can see exactly where traffic flows. It's basically exactly like that, but instead of roads and cities, it's brain cells and the physical wires connecting them together. Now, scientists have actually been trying to build these for decades, and I think this context is super important. Because back in the 80s, they actually managed to do this for the very first time. They mapped the brain of a tiny little worm called C. elegans. Now, this worm only has 302 neurons, literally just 302, and it still took them years and years to map all of those connections. And so eventually there was this project called OpenWorm, and they tried to simulate those 302 neurons in a computer. And I mean, it could kind of wiggle, the simulation worked technically, but the behavior was pretty basic. It wasn't exactly mind-blowing. And for the longest time, that's basically where the science stopped. Because mapping anything bigger than a worm was just physically impossible with the technology we had. But then there was this paper published in the journal Nature in 2024, and Nature is basically the most prestigious science journal on the planet. This was by a massive international team called the Flywire Project. And I'm just going to read you exactly what they said here because the numbers are crazy. We present a full brain connectome of an adult Drosophila melanogaster, containing around 139,255 neurons and 50 million synapses. This dataset represents a milestone in neuroscience, providing a complete wiring diagram of an animal capable of complex behaviors. And I mean, that's super interesting. Essentially, what they're saying is they finally mapped the whole thing, a 400x jump from the worm, the complete blueprint of an adult fruit fly brain. And not just any brain, but a brain that can actually do things. A fly can navigate, it can find food, it can fly. Right, so they had the map, the wiring diagram was finished. But the question was always, what do you actually do with it? Because you have to understand that a brain on its own doesn't actually do anything, it's just a map. And so this is where Eon Systems comes in. Now, they have this senior scientist, Philip Hsu, and he had already built a computational model of this exact fly brain. He took the Flywire data and turned it into a digital model that could actually process signals. But here's the thing. It was just a brain floating in a void. It was sending out motor commands, but it had no body to move. It had no legs, it had no eyes, just pure neural activity with nowhere to go. So there was this announcement from Eon Systems. This is a startup co-founded by Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross, and they basically explained how they solved this. To test whether this connectome-derived model could produce naturalistic behavior, we closed the loop by embedding the neural model within a physics-based simulated body, NeuroMechFly v2.0, running on the MuJoCo engine. Now, that is a pretty crazy thing to achieve. Essentially, what they're saying is they attach this biological brain map to a virtual fly body. And this isn't just some cartoon video game character. This NeuroMechFly thing was built from an actual X-ray scan of a real fly blade. It has 87 independent joints, it has realistic weight, it deals with gravity, it deals with contact physics when its feet touch the floor. And here's how the loop actually works in practice. The virtual fly feels its foot hit the ground in the simulation. That creates a sensory signal. That signal travels into the brain model, moving through those 125,000 simulated neurons and 50 million connections. The brain processes it, and then a motor command comes back out to move the leg. That movement creates a new sensory signal, which feeds back into the brain. Sense, process, act. over and over again, thousands of times per second, exactly like a real nervous system. And the result of this is that the virtual fly just started walking. It started grooming its antennae, it started showing actual feeding behavior. But here's the thing, and this is the part you really have to understand, because none of that was programmed. And this is where I think a lot of people are completely missing the point of why this is such a huge deal. Because we see AI doing amazing things all the time now, right? We have multimodal models, we have these massive frontier models, we see simulated robots walking around. But you have to look at how we actually build these things. When you build an AI today, you're doing one of two things. Either you're building an LLM where you just dump massive amounts of training data into a neural network and let it find the patterns. Or if you're building a robot, you use something called reinforcement learning. You put the robot in a simulation and you let it fall over 1,000,000 times. You give it a reward when it steps forward and you punish it when it falls. Eventually, it accidentally discovers how to walk. And I mean, Google DeepMind actually did this. They built a simulated fruit fly in Mujoko, and it could walk, it could do these crazy aerial maneuvers. It was super impressive. But that fly was trained. It learned to move the same way you might learn to ride a bike, through trial and error. What Eon did is the exact opposite. They didn't train anything. They didn't use reinforcement learning. They just copied the hardware. Think about it like this. Think about how you might try to build a plane. Traditional AI is like studying a bird for 10 years, looking at how it moves, and then engineering an airplane from scratch that can also fly. What Eon did is more like taking the bird's actual physical brain, ripping it out, and putting it inside the airplane. One is building an imitation. The other is literally just running the real thing on a new substrate. They took the actual biological blueprint that evolution spent millions of years in perfecting, and they just ran it. And I think this distinction matters more than people are giving it credit for right now, because it means that the intelligence didn't have to be invented by human engineers, it was just inherited. Now, of course, I have to pump the brakes here for a second, because I've seen a lot of people getting caught up with the AI hype on Twitter about this, and there are some real, genuine caveats here that you cannot ignore. Because I'm seeing people say we've uploaded a living mind to a computer, and that is just not what is happening here. Now, in their defense, Eon themselves are pretty honest about this, but you have to understand what is missing from the simulation. First of all, the neurochemistry is completely missing. A real biological brain doesn't just run on pure electricity, it's bathed in chemicals. You have neurotransmitters, you have neuromodulators, things like dopamine, serotonin, cortisol. These chemicals constantly change how the brain processes information. They control your mood, your attention, your ability to learn. And the Eon simulation doesn't include any of that. Think about it like having an iPhone where you've copied all the physical chips perfectly, but the battery is constantly changing voltage and you haven't simulated that part at all. The hardware is there, but the operating system settings are missing. And of course, it's missing glial cells too. About half the cells in your head aren't actually neurons, they're glial cells. They clean up waste, they help neurons talk to each other, they help form memories. And this simulation just ignores all of them, which is not a small omission. But here's the thing that's even bigger, and this is the philosophical elephant in the room. This is a snapshot of a dead brain. The physical fly that they scanned to get this data from, that fly is dead. It's gone. And so this simulation is frozen at one specific moment in time. This virtual fly cannot learn new things. It cannot adapt to a new environment. It cannot form new memories. There's no internal state here. This virtual fly doesn't actually get hungry. It doesn't get scared. The behaviors we're seeing are just outputs of circuits firing based on physical inputs. It's not an experience. At least, I'm pretty sure it's not. So there was this technical write-up from Eon themselves addressing exactly this point, and I want to show you this. Our model is deliberately low-dimensional. These results should not yet be interpreted as a proof that structure alone is sufficient to recover the entire behavioral repertoire of the fly, or that other biological features are unnecessary. And I have to be honest, I respect that transparency. Essentially, what they're saying is we shouldn't jump to conclusions that just having the static wiring is enough to create a whole living mind. They know it's a simplified version. And look, I have to say this too. The guy announcing this is the co-founder of the company. And I mean, obviously, when you're a startup, there's a massive business incentive to make your research sound as groundbreaking as possible to get funding. You always have to read these claims with a critical eye. But here's the thing. even with all of those limitations, and they are real limitations. The thing is that the concept actually works. Even in this super simplified form, without the chemicals, without the glial cells, you can take biological wiring, run it on silicon, and get biological behavior. That's not nothing, that's actually enormous. Because you have to remember that science has been here before. People have tried this and failed spectacularly. Back in 2013, the European Union launched this thing called the Human Brain Project. It was a billion-dollar effort to simulate the human brain inside a computer within a decade, and it completely collapsed into chaos. Over 800 neuroscientists actually signed an open letter boycotting the whole thing, because they were trying to simulate a brain without actually mapping it first. They were just guessing at the parameters. And the lesson from that disaster was that you cannot simulate what you don't actually understand. You have to build the map first. And that is exactly what Aeon is doing. They're starting from the absolute bottom. Real biological data, real connectomes, real wiring, and they're scaling up methodically. Because Aeon's next target is the mouse brain. Now, the fruit fly has 125,000 neurons. A mouse brain has 70 million neurons. That is a 560x jump in scale, which is genuinely terrifying when you think about the compute required for that inference. And I could be wrong here, but a full mouse brain emulation in 2 years? Aeon is kind of hinting at these super aggressive timelines, and I'm pretty sure that is just crazy. Because right now, researchers have only managed to map about 0.2% of the mouse brain. Just a tiny, tiny slice, literally 1 cubic millimeter of tissue. And just mapping that 1 millimeter generated 1.6 petabytes of data. It took 150 scientists working for 9 years. So the idea that they're going to map the whole thing and simulate it in a couple of years, I'm highly skeptical of that. But the direction of travel, I mean, that is super wild, because the tools are actually getting better. And I think you can see where this is going, because we've spent the last decade on this one specific path to AGI. We build bigger LLMs, we increase the parameters, we optimize the inference, we throw more compute at the benchmarks. And I'm not dismissing that approach. It has been genuinely incredible. But what if there's a shortcut? What if instead of trying to figure out how intelligence works from scratch, we just copy the final homework assignment that evolution already completed? Now, look, I have to be clear, we're nowhere near doing this with a human. The gap between a fruit fly and a human is basically incomprehensible. 125,000 neurons versus 86 billion. And that's before you even account for the chemistry and the glial cells and all the stuff we don't even know we don't know yet. So I'm not saying we're living in the Matrix tomorrow. This isn't happening next year. But what I am saying is that this is a proof of concept. Think about it like this. Think about the Wright brothers in 1903. Their first flight lasted 12 seconds. It went 120 feet. It was completely useless for any practical purpose. Nobody watching that little wooden glider would have predicted that we'd have massive commercial jets crossing the ocean within 50 years. But it proved the principle. It proved that heavier than air flight was actually possible. And once a principle is proven, the only question left is engineering and money. And I would argue that Aeon Systems just had their 12-second flight moment for digital biology. They proved that you can take biological wiring, run it on silicon, and get biological behavior. I mean, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be rushing to scale this up to human brains just yet. I'm not sure we're actually ready to deal with the ethical reality of what happens when that works. But, of course, let me know what you guys think about this. Is this biological copying the real path to AGI? Or are we just playing with digital zombies that look alive but are completely empty inside? Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. And if you found this useful, you know what to do.